All right, so today we're diving into some seriously unsettling news. You sent over those reports from Al Jazeera, CNN, and AP News, all covering that apparent assassination attempt on former President Trump yesterday.
Yeah, and it's a real head spinner. We're talking about an incident on a golf course, a suspect with this surprisingly tangled past, and all the potential implications for the 2024 election. Like, where do we even begin with this one?
Well, I think we should probably set the scene first. Imagine it's a Sunday afternoon, seemingly peaceful. Trump's out there enjoying a round at his West Palm Beach golf club, when suddenly everything changes.
It's almost like something out of a movie, the way these reports describe it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one minute everything's normal, the next there's a Secret Service agent drying their weapon, a suspect's running from the scene.
You know what gets me is that detail about the agents spotting the rifle barrel first. It was an AK-style rifle, just poking out from the bushes along the course perimeter. According to CNN, Trump was just a few hundred yards away. Can you imagine that pressure? Like, these agents are constantly scanning for threats.
Oh, absolutely. And this incident, it really underscores that, like, level of vigilance that's required to protect these high-profile figures, especially in today's political climate.
And this isn't just any political climate, is it? This is the second apparent attempt on Trump's life, just this election cycle. I mean, remember that incident in Pennsylvania back in July? It's hard to forget. And what's so striking about this latest incident is that the suspect didn't even fire his weapon. He fled the scene, led police on a chase down I-95 before finally being apprehended. It's like he wanted to make a statement but not follow through with the full, horrific act.
Okay, now that is where it gets really interesting. Like, who is this guy? Why go to all the trouble of getting that close to Trump with a weapon only to run? Luckily, we actually know his identity. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Routh. And his background, let me tell you, it's more than a little curious. It's almost like we're trying to put together this jigsaw puzzle, but in the dark, These reports from Al Jazeera and CNN, they paint such a conflicting picture of this Ryan Wesley Routh. Yeah, it's the definition of contradictions, right? Like, on one hand, you've got this small business owner in Hawaii who was even featured in that Honolulu Star Advertiser piece, remember, for donating a building to help the homeless. Seems like a stand-up guy.
Totally. And then you dig a little deeper and boom, this 2002 case from North Carolina pops up. Possessing a weapon of mass destruction, resisting arrest, even identity theft. It's like, are we even talking about the same guy?
And that's what makes this whole case so fascinating, right? We have these seemingly totally random pieces of information about this Routh character, and the big question is how they connect. Like, for example, his social media posts. They revealed this deep interest in global politics, especially war in Ukraine.
Right. CNN and the New York Times, they both mentioned his vocal support for Ukraine and his efforts to recruit Afghan refugees to fight against Russia. He even spent time in Ukraine himself.
Kind of wild, right? A far cry from, like, owning a business in Hawaii.
It really is. And then you add on this whole other layer of his political leanings. Back in 2020, his social media showed support for Trump's reelection, but more recently, he seems to have leaned more towards Biden and Harris, even criticizing Trump's response to that July assassination attempt.
So are we maybe looking at a case of shifting political allegiances, maybe even like a radicalization of sorts? Could that be what explains his actions?
It's possible, but we have to be so careful about drawing any kind of premature conclusions, We're still working with such limited information here. We don't have access to his personal thoughts or what specific events might have led him to this point. You're right, we can't get ahead of ourselves. But what we can do is consider the bigger picture here. This incident, no matter what Ruth's motivations were, it's definitely sent some ripples throughout the entire political landscape.
Absolutely. Like Biden and Harris, they both condemned the act, calling for unity and an end to political violence, which is obviously the appropriate response.
And then there's Trump, right, using this whole thing to take aim at his opponents and their rhetoric. He's claiming this is a direct result of how politically charged everything is, even going so far as to imply that Biden and Harris are somehow responsible. Didn't we see something similar after that July incident?
Yeah, AP News had a whole piece on that. It's definitely a concerning pattern, to say the least. And it really highlights all the pressure and scrutiny the Secret Service is under, especially now with the election so close. Don't forget, this is the second time someone's apparently tried to go after Trump in just a few months.
It's scary, honestly. A real reminder of the dangers that come with holding office, even as a former president. After that July incident, remember, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle resigned, and they launched that huge internal investigation. This latest thing is just going to make those calls for tighter security even louder. And not just for Trump, but for every candidate.
Definitely. And it goes beyond just physical safety, too. This incident brings up some big questions about campaigning, the debates, even just how candidates interact with each other and the public. In this super tense environment, how do you even guarantee a safe and fair election?
Big questions, no easy answers. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the actual investigations. What's the latest?
Well, CNN is saying the FBI is leading the charge, working with the Secret Service and other agencies. They're looking at everything. Routh's online activity, phone records, financial transactions, the whole 9 yards. They're even digging into things he did on platforms based outside the U.S., which makes things even more complicated.
Sounds like they're pulling out all the stops. What about charges? What's he facing right now?
Right now, it's federal gun charges. But depending on what they dig up, he could be looking at more charges directly related to the attempted attack. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis also launched a state-level investigation, saying transparency and accountability are key here.
So a lot of moving pieces, a lot of unanswered questions. But the big one is, how is this going to affect the 2024 election?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Impossible to say for sure, but we can think about some possibilities. Will this energize Trump's base, turn off moderate voters, lead to even more harsh rhetoric and division?
Yeah, a lot to process. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this and what it means for a long time.
No doubt. It's a huge reminder that we're living in unpredictable times, and staying vigilant, thinking critically, and being responsible with what we say are more important than ever.
Couldn't agree more. This was a lot to unpack. Thanks for diving into it all with me.
Anytime. Stay curious,
Stay
stay informed,